Okay, folks, next one, we've got one much more focusing on overcoming food safety challenges in CEA. There's no point building the whole system you've got if the food doesn't hit the food safety requirements. Many have failed on that, and we've seen certainly CEA systems, particularly ones that build next to livestock facilities and are taking groundwater, have fallen foul of this before. So Caitlin from Ceres Certifications is the expert on this and is going to tell us all about it. Caitlin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So my name is Caitlin Pickard, and I'm with Ceres Certifications International. I work closely with companies across the food industry on food safety audits and certification programs. So I get to see firsthand the challenges and the best practices happening out in the field. In addition to that, I have hands-on experience working within a CEA startup. I was involved in building and managing a growing food safety program. So that experience really gave me a practical perspective on the day-to-day challenges that come with scaling food safety in these types of operations. So today I'm going to be talking about overcoming food safety challenges in CEA. As many of you know, CEA brings a lot of advantages, but with that also comes a unique set of food safety considerations that don't always show up in traditional agriculture. So to start, I'll walk through what we're going to be covering today. So here's a quick overview. First, we'll talk about why food safety is unique in controlled environment agriculture. Even though CEA gives you more control, it also introduces a different risk profile that's important to understand. From there, we'll get into some of the most common food safety challenges we see in these operations. Specifically, we'll look at environmental monitoring, cleaning and sanitation, and facility and infrastructure, areas that tend to cause the most issues if they are not set up correctly from the start. And then we'll wrap up by talking through what CEA businesses should be preparing for. We'll talk about some regulatory changes and best practices that we're seeing the industry move towards. So the goal is to give you that full picture from understanding the risk all the way through to what you can do about them. So we'll start why food safety is unique in CEA. At first glance, it may seem like CEA would reduce food safety risks, but in reality, it just changes where those risks are coming from and compared to traditional agriculture. One of the biggest differences is the recirculated water system. In traditional ag, water is usually applied once and then it's gone. In CEA, that same water is often used throughout the system. So if contamination is introduced, it can spread quickly if it's not properly monitored and controlled. Another major difference is employee interaction. In CEA, there's typically much more hands-on activity during growing and harvesting. So that brings up employee hygiene, training, and just overall food safety awareness is super important with our employees. You also have consistently high humidity environments, and while that is great for our plant growth, it can also create ideal conditions for microbial growth if it's not well controlled. We often see condensation build up on equipment and throughout the facility, which can lead to issues like rust, standing water, and even algae growth over time. Lastly, we have year-round production cycles. So traditional ag naturally has that season downtime. It allows for deep cleaning, resets. And in CEA, the operations are often continuous. So you have to be a lot more intentional about scheduling cleaning, scheduling maintenance, those verification activities, and creating the space for that time to have a reset. So overall, while CEA offers a lot of benefits in terms of control and consistency, it definitely requires a different approach to food safety, one that's going to focus more on proactive monitoring and prevention. And that takes us right into environmental monitoring. So now that we talked a little bit about how CEA is different, we're going to look at those differences and those common challenges, how that turns into those. So starting with environmental monitoring, one of the biggest concerns is listeria in moist environments. As I mentioned just now, CEA facilities typically operate with consistently high humidity. which creates those ideal conditions for listeria to survive and persist. Unlike some other organisms, it can live for long periods in damp or wet areas, which makes it especially important to control proactively. And that leads right into drain contamination. Drains are a major harborage point for listeria, especially in moist environments and areas with standing water or heavy organic buildup. The concern here is really that drain issues are rarely isolated. They typically indicate a broader floor contamination, which creates risk for spread through shoes, wheels, carts, any other equipment that you have moving throughout your facility on those drains. Not to mention that it can get really expensive when you have listeria presence in your drains. Vector swabbing, lab testing, the chemicals you need to properly remediate those positive findings, costs will add up really quickly, especially if the issue becomes recurring. That said, I do think it's important to reframe how we think about positive swabs in general. In environmental monitoring, it really is a seek and destroy approach, something I'm sure many of you have heard before. If you're not swabbing high risk areas like your drains, you're not really preventing anything. You're just generating data that doesn't give you meaningful insights. And interestingly, auditors actually expect to see the occasional out of spec swabs. That is part of real world production. So, what matters most is not that you're never finding anything or nothing is ever out of spec. It's how you respond when you have those findings. Proper documentation, root cause analysis, effective corrective and preventive actions, those are what ultimately demonstrate a high quality program. So drains are a great example of where environmental monitoring isn't just about compliance. It's about actively finding risk and controlling it before it becomes a bigger issue. Next, we'll transition to HVAC contamination. So this is something that I've personally seen come up in CEA environments, especially during audits. When condensation forms, especially from HVAC systems above product zones, it creates a direct contamination risk, especially if it's dripping onto exposed product or food contact surfaces. HVAC systems also impact airflow through the facility, so if they aren't properly designed or maintained, they can contribute to both condensation and the movement of contamination through the space. So because of that, it's important to monitor those areas really closely. Many environmental monitoring programs include swabbing under those known leaks or condensation points, along with air sampling and routine checks of the filters, the ductwork, those airflow patterns. So what makes this especially challenging is that these issues are usually tied back to facility design, not just sanitation. So instead of being a quick corrective action, it's not just putting sanitation chemicals under those spots. It usually becomes a larger facility project involving your food safety department, maintenance facilities department, sometimes your growers, especially if airflow is a topic. So short-term controls like increased monitoring or shielding your product, it can help, but long-term resolution usually requires structural fixes like insulation, airflow adjustments, ventilation changes. So this is a really good example of how in CEA, environmental risks like condensation and HVAC issues aren't just sanitation or monitoring problems. They're deeply tied to how the facility itself is designed and operated. Next, let's talk about cleaning and sanitation challenges in CEA. This is another area where we commonly see gaps, not because companies don't care about sanitation, because they're not investing in it, but because the systems in growing environments can be much more difficult to clean than traditional food operations. So many of the CEA operations we see out there have those complex grow systems. Where the materials, the equipment design, the ability to fully disassemble those components, it all impacts how they can effectively be cleaned and sanitized. So if equipment isn't designed with sanitation in mind, it can create hard to reach areas where buildup and contamination can persist. Common when we're talking about growing towers, rafts, channels. While these systems work great for production, they can also trap moisture and organic material, creating ideal conditions for biofilm formation, something you can see in the photo there. And once biofilms establish, they can be very difficult to remove with routine cleaning alone. You're typically going to need a targeted project and manpower on that to kind of reset. Another challenge we see is chemical selection, especially in plant growing environments. It can be difficult to find cleaning and sanitizing chemicals that are both effective and safe to use around active crops. This becomes even more challenging when you're dealing with issues like algae, where the chemistry needed to control it may also pose a risk to your plant health if not carefully selected and controlled. Because of that, it's really important to rely on your trusted chemical vendors for guidance. And ensure that your sanitation programs are properly validated and verified, not just assumed to be effective because maybe the surface looks clean. And that goes straight to execution. Strong sanitation programs require more than just having the right chemicals in place. They depend on clear procedures, proper employee training, consistent daily execution, and your SSOPs should reflect that. They should have included in there how the cleaning is performed every step, what chemicals are used, the concentration those chemicals are at, your required contact time, safety precautions. Do your employees have the proper PPE? Verification steps after cleaning is complete, and who's responsible for each one of those tasks. The more detailed and standardized your procedures are, the more consistent sanitation practices you'll see across your employees across different shifts. And training, just as important here, employees need to understand not only how to perform these tasks correctly, but why these controls matter. So even strong procedures can fail if they're not performed consistently and following those SSOPs. And all of this information should be organized in your master sanitation schedule. This is another place that we see some audit noncompliances. The schedule should identify everything requiring cleaning. So from floors, walls, drains, overhead structures, all the way to your smaller hand tools and equipment. In that master sanitation schedule, you should have the defined cleaning frequencies. Is it daily, weekly, monthly, annually? And each activity should tie back to those SSOPs and those verification records. So where programs tend to fall short is in consistency and execution and in record keeping. From an audit perspective, that's critical because if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. So overall, sanitation and CEA isn't just about cleaning. It's about building a system that's practical, that's validated, consistently executed, and fully documented from start to finish. So finally, we'll talk about facility and infrastructure issues. Many of these challenges we've already discussed, like environmental monitoring and sanitation, often trace back to how the facility is designed and maintained. One of the biggest issues we see is poor zoning and traffic flow, especially whenever our operations are under one roof. In CEA ops, it's important to clearly separate raw and finished good products in areas, especially if allergens are present. Facilities also need clear zoning around PPE requirements, controls like foot baths. You want your employees to understand how to move through the operation safely and where those PPE and sanitation checkpoints are. Without those controls, you increase the risk of cross-contamination through people, equipment moving through, product moving. Another common issue, hard to clean surfaces, which we kind of already touched on. Equipment, floors and walls are another place where we see that. If surfaces have seams, damage, porous materials, they can become long-term sanitation concerns, especially in high moisture environments where biofilms can develop really easily. This is also something that should be considered when purchasing equipment. From experience, I can say that there is nothing worse than showing up to work and new equipment has shown up without food safety leadership being involved in that decision. Equipment like conveyor belts can quickly become a sanitation burden if they're not designed to be easily cleaned and taken apart and maintained. So bringing food safety into your purchasing decisions early on can make a big difference in preventing those long-term sanitation challenges. Drain design is another major concern. Poorly graded drains with limited drainage that's difficult to access for cleaning, all of that can become recurring contamination sources, especially in high moisture or high traffic areas. And you can take a lot of manpower hours if they are not easy to take apart and clean. Lastly, facility maintenance and documentation, they're critical from both a food safety and audit standpoint. Repairs, preventive maintenance, vendor work, even temporary fixes all need to be properly tracked and documented. One thing we commonly see during audits is maintenance programs being, downgraded, downpointed because documentation is incomplete or inconsistent. Temporary repairs may be made, but never actually tracked. Preventative maintenance records may be missing signatures or completion dates. Work orders may not clearly show what was repaired and how or who verified it. Even when the physical issue was fixed correctly, poor documentation can still lead to audit findings because there's no evidence the issue was fully managed and verified and properly closed out. Again, as auditors say, if it isn't documented, didn't happen. So overall facility design and infrastructure really set the foundation for food safety and CEA. If the facility itself isn't designed to support sanitation and contamination control, it becomes much harder to manage those risks effectively long term. Now that we've talked through those key challenges, I want to shift into what CEA and indoor farming businesses should be preparing for moving forward. Really, two main areas: certification challenges and broader industry trends. For certification programs, we're seeing continued updates across major schemes. SQF Edition 10 is coming, Primus GFS version 4.0 is coming, Global GAP version 6, primarily with some primary production updates. And then just indoor ag specific guidance coming down the line. We're hopefully going to see even more, different auditing schemes that are centered to CEA and indoor farming. And then there's a few hot topics in the industry. Depends on, which country you're in, of what kind of legal things that you're seeing coming down the line as well. But a lot of those hot topics: traceability and supply chain transparency. You have to be able to follow your product from start to finish. Packaging and food safety, food contact material requirements, especially as more products are moving into the market. We got to make sure that they're following all of those packaging regulations as well. Agriculture, water, and hydroponic system oversight. Water management, like we mentioned, is under increased scrutiny. Environmental monitoring and indoor contamination risk, especially since we've seen some recalls in the CEA space. This is a hot topic. And finally, sustainability and customer transparency are becoming more important, not from a regulatory standpoint necessarily, but our customers and our buyers are asking more questions about how product is grown and how it's managed and handled. So overall, key takeaway here is that expectations for CEA operations are continuing to evolve. Businesses that are proactive, building strong, adaptable programs now are going to be in a much better position as these requirements continue to develop. So what I hope everyone can take away from our talk today is building a strong food safety program in CEA isn't just about checking a box for certification. We want to create something that's scalable, adaptable, and designed to manage risk as our operation grows. That's really where we come in at Ceres Certifications, working closely with CEA and indoor ag operations to not only support certification, but to ensure our programs are practical and effective and aligned with where the industry is heading. So if you have any questions or are thinking about certification, program improvements, or just want to talk through challenges you're seeing, I'm happy to connect. My email is on the slide, or you can message us on LinkedIn or on our website. And you can use the QR code here to follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Caitlin. It's
you.
an area that people are not, how shall we say, enthused to be working on when they're working in a factory. But I think it only needs something to go wrong and it could kill the business stone dead.
Absolutely.
So it has to be a key part. And I think integrating it into, certainly for young businesses, integrating it into the risk register, it becomes a very significant part because it is very easy to get wrong.
Yeah.
But one bit we maybe didn't pick up on, and I'm very keen on the bit when you show the picture of the biofilms. The knee-jerk reaction to that is just blast it with nasty chemicals. But actually, I throw a lot of bleach at it. Are you starting to see different things coming in? Because I know they use things like nanobubble systems for cleaning biofilm and sewage pipes and systems like that. Are you seeing that these systems coming into CEA as benign but effective the biofilm and disease control systems?
Yeah, there's lots of technology we're seeing coming through, especially in those water systems. Like you mentioned, some of those nano bubblers, having the different lighting system that's supposed to help sanitize and kill off that algae, and even some chemicals that you can mix directly into your water systems that don't impact your plants, but kind of are just strong enough to help kill off some of that algae and biofilms.
Yeah, so it's not just pushing the problem downstream. Which I think
absolutely, it's preventing it.
Someone else will monitor that and trace it back, and you will find accordingly. Cool. So going back to that then, I mean, there was a lot in there from really good pointers and almost like I wouldn't go as far to say an idiot's guide, but it's a logical guide. So what resources are available for people new to the industry that want to go into this? Do they come directly to you?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's a lot of good resources out there if you're just getting started in food safety program for your operation. There's different industry groups, the regulatory agencies, certification standards. They all provide a pretty solid framework. The CEA Alliance Food Safety Guide, I want to shout that out. That's a great example of some documentation there and guidance specifically for indoor agriculture. And audit standards are a great place to start, just to read through and kind of see what a complete program should look like and what those different topics are that you should be exploring. Beyond that, working with experienced partners, consultants, certification bodies, even like your chemical and equipment suppliers can be a really great source of knowledge.
Yeah, I think a useful thing as well is if you're making food, chat to the people that your food is going to and find out what certification they need you to have.
Yes.
Because I'm finding some people go, oh, I didn't realize I needed that. I think, well, surely you have to understand the chain you're within. But if people are new to it, they kind of think life is easy and sensible. Well, it is, but it's auditably sensible, I think, is the key part within that. Okay, cool. Well, thanks very much for that. I think that's been really useful. You've invigorated what can often be a topic people don't want to hear. So I think that you've done a fantastic job in that. So anything to do with the food safety aspect, please contact Caitlin. The contact details are here. The networking behind there, you can contact her through that with specific questions or queries. Please do so. Caitlin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you again.